You are listening to the Beyond the High Road podcast with Shelby Milford, episode number 47, for real this time. Stay tuned. Welcome to Beyond the High Road. Hey guys, I'm jumping on after editing, and I just wanted to let you know that I had so much extra footage this time because I tried to squeeze in recording the episode in between clients. I have like time blindness. I think that I have a lot more time than I do. And then I record it in like 2 different sittings, and it's not one easy flow. This happens probably every other episode at least. So I have all this other information sitting there. I don't never know what to do with it. So it just gets edited out. And so I was thinking about today, I'm like, this is a shame. I was trying to fit it all into this episode and it got to be way too long. And so I'm just going to drop it into the private Facebook group. So if you want to watch the extra footage, then come over and join the private Facebook group. I swear this wasn't a ploy to get you to join. I just was like, what am I going to do with all this information? So I just figured, why not? That way you guys could at least, it's just, if not, it's just going to waste. So if you want the extra footage, the extra video footage, come watch it in the Facebook group. I'm going to drop it in there right after I publish this today. So again, sorry this is late. That's why. I had all this information and I was trying to mesh it into one video. It was just too much. So yeah, come get it over in the private Facebook group. Also, too, I dropped in a 5-minute portion into the bottom of this episode too. So you'll notice that it goes from like talking about setting the boundaries with your children and finishing up. And then I go back into a more in-depth definition of boundary setting. So you got bonus 5 minutes at the bottom, and then Facebook group is going to have the other bonus sections. Okay. All right. So now we get on with the episode. Hey, y'all. How's everybody doing today? I still haven't thought of a nickname for you guys. Help me out. I've had a couple of people right after I put out that episode a while back. I don't know. That was like back in the springtime. I had a couple people respond real quick and we were getting somewhere, but I kind of want it to be a little funny too, but still, something that you guys would all like. I don't know. Anyway, today we are going to be talking about boundaries. If you are one that is trying to exercise boundaries and you constantly feel like your boundaries are being violated, then this is a good one for you because I'm going to explain why that is most of the time and then what you can do about it. So this is really, like a boundaries 101 and why yours aren't working. I haven't titled it yet. Listen, also, you guys, I'll say this at the end too, but I'm going to put a link down in the show notes for a PDF, a worksheet for proper boundary setting, like a way to get your mind straight around the boundary that you want to set. It'll be beyondthehighroad.com/boundaries. Also, in the very near future, I'm going to do an episode about manuals. When we have a manual, we as adults forget that our own thoughts cause our feelings and not anything that anybody else does. So it would be like, I want them to do that thing so that I can feel blank, whatever the insert your emotion there. It's a set of rules, unwritten rules that you have mentally written. They should do this. They should do that. They should know not to say A, B, and C. And then a boundary, on the other hand, enables you to allow what you want into your life. And it helps you to keep out what you don't want in your life. Like the metaphor of a fence around your property is often used. I think actually that book Boundaries with Henry Cloud, is that right? Was the one where I first read that. I went through a whole slew of boundaries books, boundaries in marriage, boundaries. There was like 3 or 4 of them that he did one after another. And I read all of them looking for ways that I could actually make my ex do the things that I wanted so that I could feel a certain way. What I was just talking to you about with the manual. I read all the books. I looked everywhere to try to figure out the secret to a boundary so that they would work. Well, what a boundary is like, imagine a fence around your property, right? And so the fence is there to keep maybe your dogs and your children in and the riffraff out, unless you invite them in. If somebody comes in, you tell them, yo, maybe you didn't realize that you just walked through a gate there, but that's my property. I would like you to please leave. And if you don't, blank, 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 I will call the police, the HOA, whatever. So that is the most simplistic way of explaining it. A boundary delineates where one person starts and another person ends. So it's a way of like taking ownership of your own emotional health. When we have proper boundaries and limits in place for our own self, it's a vulnerable place to be, right? Because you are lovingly telling them, this is what I can handle. These are my preferences based on what I know is good for me. And so when you're acting in love for yourself, then you share that with somebody else, somebody that maybe you want to remain in relationship with when we're talking about a romantic relationship, then it's an act of love. It promotes intimacy and intimacy in friendships as well. And on the other hand, if you have weak boundaries or no boundaries, that promotes enmeshment. There is no I start, you end. It's the opposite of closeness. There is no respect. It is assumed that on one or possibly both sides, that one person is to adopt your character traits, your preferences. Enmeshment is the opposite of a boundary set in love. It is at the core of what emotional childhood is. All right, so let's talk about what a boundary is and what it isn't. Let's say you won't get into a car with somebody that's had more than a couple drinks, right? Like a 2-drink limit. If you notice that they grab the keys to the car and you've personally seen them drink like maybe 4 or 5 drinks, whatever, anything over 2, you can say, you know what? If you plan on driving your car, if you insist, then I'm going to go ahead and grab an Uber because I don't get in the car with somebody after they've drank more than 2 drinks. It's nothing against you. I love you. It's not going to change my opinion about you. This is not coming from a place of judgment. This is just the way that I protect myself. And so that's how a boundary like that would go for your personal safety. So it's not against the person. It's not like, fuck you, you did this. No, you are responsible for your emotional well-being in this situation and also for your physical well-being, right? You're saying, look, I get it. You're cool with doing that. I wish you wouldn't. I don't think it's a great thing for you to do, but you are a grown-ass adult. And if you want to drive home with more than, a few drinks in you, okay, but I don't prefer that. In fact, actually, there are a lot of ways you could handle that because now that I'm saying it out loud, I mean, maybe you don't want them on the road because they could hurt other people. And then you could have, a protocol for that too. If they've been drinking, more than a few drinks, then you could also call somebody so that they don't hurt anybody else. But that's not the point of this right here. For you, a boundary is, if you say that you don't get in the car with somebody that's been drinking, then you just state it to them. Listen, this is nothing about you. I'm not upset with you. I'm not judging. I'm not sitting on my soapbox. I just don't prefer to get into a car. I don't feel safe. So I'm going to go ahead and take an Uber. Or let's say you're in the car again with somebody and they are texting and like distracted. They're like yelling at you, yelling at their kid in the back, and they're all over the place. You can say in that moment, hey, I know I'm riding in your car and I really appreciate the ride. And I also don't feel comfortable with all of the distractions. Like if you're going to continue to text and look behind you and yell at me or the kids, I'm including it all in here, then I'm going to have to just ask you to stop the car and then I'll just go ahead and get an Uber. That is a proper boundary set. You are taking a responsibility of yourself in that moment and not willing what you want their behavior to be. You know what I'm saying? They can continue to go on and act as they will because they're adults. But what you will do is not grace their presence in their car anymore, right? So you will go ahead and exit the car and take care of your own personal safety and mental well-being, emotional well-being. Okay? So it's a sort of a game plan, something that you set and say to them, listen, you can continue to act that way, but just know that that's not that's not in my rule set. That's not my personal preference. So if or when you continue to act that way, I will do A, B, C. That is the proper way to set a boundary with somebody. When it comes to like a violation of hitting, like your physical safety, somebody is actually like being abusive to you, I don't usually think that that's something that you need to state to somebody. I mean, I think we all know that hitting is not okay. But when we talk about preferences, some people are okay with getting into a car with somebody that's had 5 drinks. It is what it is. Now, where it gets sticky, what's not a boundary is when you are like, in my case, with my last ex, not my daughter's father. I really got to come up with nicknames for them too, because that's like such a long way to say it. But so I would be like, you can't go to the bar anymore. If you go to the bar, then I'm going to leave. All right. There's so many things wrong with this boundary altogether because 1, I was never going to follow through with the consequence, right? But 2, I wasn't setting that boundary in love. And I was depending on his behavior in order for me to feel relief, to feel comfort, to feel needed, respected. So he would go out and I would track his cell phone without him knowing. I would call to the bar and see if he was there. Basically, play spy. Boy, was that exhausting. But I would play spy because he had lied and lied and lied. And instead of me knowing, okay, this is not exactly, I don't want to live my life this way. This person obviously is choosing this over me, which now, thank God that was the case because I needed to get out. But I wasn't able to do that. I was fully in emotional childhood back then. And so I expected him to straighten up and fly right in order for me to feel good. I was putting it all on him. And so that is actually me violating his boundaries because here I am then invading his privacy. I was tracking his cell phone. That is a boundary violation. I just thought I was being crafty. But anyway, it made me feel, if you can relate to this, how shitty it makes you feel when you do this. Because when you're expecting somebody else to change, you never actually find relief. You never find what you're looking for. If you do, it is fleeting. And you're constantly, you can become sort of like obsessed with it. You're always checking up on them. You're, playing that like mother, father, like authoritative role. Well, did you do this? Did you do that? Like there's no trust there because you are asking them to go against their will in order for you to find happiness. It never works. It never, ever works. Not for long anyway. So that's the biggest difference, I think, between a boundary and a manual. We can mix it up though, because especially coming from trauma, most of us have some unprocessed stuff. We can feel activated at a reminder of something or some familiar behavior. And so your body all of a sudden and your brain can feel like you need to go into self-protect mode. And so you're like, oh, like red flag, they're violating my boundaries. I need to set something up quick. And when you're trying to direct and control people so that they stop doing the thing, not a healthy way to set a boundary. Okay. It's not your fault that you're having this response. It makes sense. This is your nervous system performing exactly how it should be. This is like a healthy response given your history. But what you would want to do in a situation like that is take responsibility of yourself and go, okay, I'm feeling activated here, triggered, if you want to use that word. And I know it's because I'm thinking that what they're doing is what is affecting me, but it's really my thoughts about what they're doing that's affecting me. So in order for me to lessen this response, this automatic nervous system response, what I need to do is develop some sort of protocol, self-care for me in the moments when I get activated, right? This is your own boundary for yourself, as opposed to trying to point out there, they need to fix that, what they're doing, because it's triggering me. This is something I see very often with my clients. They're doing this and it's totally messing with me. And if they loved me, then they would know not to do that. And it's not the case because you're an adult. So not to say, just know that when I'm saying this, that there are preferences that you can have that you can, communicate with the other person. But right now, let's stick with the basics of boundaries. So when you feel activated because of the way that somebody's behaving and it reminds you subconsciously of something that happened to you, that you haven't yet processed, it's a good time to say, okay, I feel myself getting activated, narrate it to yourself. What is my protocol? Like determine your protocol beforehand. Maybe you use tapping. A lot of people find relief from tapping. EMDR, you can go back into counseling. You can come to the Healing and Reinvention program, but something so that you are taking care of you, so that you're being responsible for your own responses to whatever outside circumstance is happening. So somebody acts a specific way, as long as they're not like physically violating or putting you in danger, then this is something that you take responsibility for. Okay, I don't like that behavior, but I'm finding that it's something internally that is happening. And so I'm going to take care of myself in this area. So you could actually, you're not going to like this, you could actually look at that person that is doing the behavior that's activating you as like a little gift dropped right into your life to make you aware of the areas that are still not processed. They're little, tiny little prezzies for you. Oh, look, they just made me aware of areas that I didn't even know I was still holding on to. So yeah, this is a manual thing. You want them to act a specific way so that they can make your life more comfortable. And like I said just a bit ago, this will never work on a consistent basis or for very long. Okay. And you are truly an emotional childhood because you're like, you've got all of your attention out there. It's them, it's them, it's them. And when you are able to say, oh, I feel it in me, let's turn the attention to me. How can I support myself through this so that I can now use the most reliable source now to support me now and going forward? It is the most empowering thing you can do for yourself. Instead of pointing the finger and saying, they're the ones that made me feel this way, right? You say, I don't like what they're doing right now. I have thoughts about what they're doing right now. I think they should be acting a specific way, and it's not that way. And that is on me, actually. Even if you could get a whole building full of people to agree with you that they shouldn't be acting that way, if they're not physically, if they're not endangering you, then it's actually something that you can control with your own thoughts. Now, this is not to say that you should not get angry when somebody behaves in a way that is angering. Not at all. Like, there are times where you're going to get angry. People do things and you don't like it, especially when we're talking about our situations of alienation. They're going to do some really shitty things in your mind. But the most empowering thing for you to remember is that it's not what they're doing that is causing your emotions. It's the thoughts you have, the story about what they're doing, like why you think what they're doing is affecting you negatively. That is what you can work on. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't be angry, but you can work on your own responses to it, internally and of course, externally, like how you respond in your actions to it. Okay. So it's just when you realize it, it's just your thoughts that you can change, not because you want to all of a sudden like everything that everybody does. No, you can decide, look, that pisses me off and I'm okay with that. I've taken care of like what I need to take care of as far as my own responsibility and thought models about this. And I'm going to go ahead and continue not to like what they're doing and move along with my life and know that I do not need them to change in order for me to be happy. If I really wanted to be happy around the situation, I can make myself happy around the situation by starting to believe new things about what they're doing, right? Okay. It is not becoming a doormat at all. It's the opposite of that because you are truly showing up for yourself. When you're a doormat, everybody else is responsible for you, for hurting you. No, when you're like, yeah, they're acting over there, like how they're acting. And I know that that's where they end and I begin, right? This is like so empowering to know that. Yeah, but that's on them. I'm here. This is my area. Also, you'll know if it's a manual issue as opposed to a boundary issue if you are like, I just need to defend myself. Somebody needs to stand up for me. This really applies to our situations, right? Like I'm all by myself and all of them are against me. When you're in that place, this is not a boundary issue. 9 times out of 10. If you're coming from a place of aggression, exasperation, that you need to defend yourself, this is not a boundary thing. not at that moment. Now, you may later, when you come into a place of loving yourself, then you can set the boundary. But at the time when you feel exasperated, angry, and like, somebody needs to tell them that they're wrong and that they need to do this. And these are my boundaries and they're crossing them. This is a control issue. This is a manual issue. This happens a lot of times when we are speaking about our children, which also I'm going to address this in a second about the gray areas there. But when we're speaking about either our children or our exes, let's say, for instance, the example of visitation. So they're demanding that you switch time and you are like, they always do this. They're always freaking putting on me last minute. And I just don't know. I had all these plans and now I'm screwed. My plans are screwed and all the things. And you're going to want to stand up for yourself. Like, this isn't okay. And you're crossing a boundary because now all of your life is coming on to me. In that moment, that is not a good time to set a boundary because you're just basically trying to control how they act. You want them to stop calling or texting or emailing my family wizard last minute. That is not okay for you. And even the requests coming in, you don't like it. It's activating for you. But really, truly, it's not. They're just behaving how they behave. Okay. Now, when you decide to grant whatever it is that they want, usually out of fear in the end, or like you're just tired, you're actually violating your own boundary for yourself. Okay. So they're not violating anything. You've decided, fine, but I'll just we'll just switch just so that I don't hear anything else about this. That is you violating your own boundary. And then chances are you're mad at yourself for that, but you might be misplacing it onto them. Okay. So, but when you're like wanting to defend or stand up for yourself, you've pretty much already missed your opportunity, like way before, to clearly state a boundary for yourself. Does that make sense? Like, it's past the time, at least for now. Now you've got to wait for a little bit till you cool off and do it. Another example, this is an easy example. If your adult sibling, comes over to your house all the time, just walks in the front door and doesn't knock, doesn't ring the doorbell, doesn't call or text beforehand, just comes in, grabs something to eat from your fridge and turns on the TV, and it's super annoying to you, they're not crossing your boundary. Even though it's your home, it's a family member, right? Until you clearly state it. So you must say to them, hey, if you continue to come over to the house without calling or texting, I'm going to start locking the door. I'm not going to answer the door. I won't be here. I won't continue to allow you to come into the house anymore. This is proper execution of a boundary. But when you are pissed off and you're like, God, why do you always come over and blah, 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 and you don't set a clear consequence of what'll happen, like if you, then there's no boundary cross, right? They don't know. You've not yet said it to them. So then what will happen is you will get exhausted, exasperated, and like pissed off and resentful at them because you were too scared to set the boundary to begin with. Sometimes we're scared that's a good segue, because sometimes we're scared to set boundaries with people because we're fearful of how they really will react. Maybe your sibling, the one that's been coming into the house, you haven't set a boundary with them because they helped you out and they gave you money in a time of need. And so now you feel indebted to them. And so because you don't want to make them mad, or you don't want to hurt their feelings, or you're fearful of losing the relationship, you're fearful of losing their approval, acceptance, whatever. And so you don't set the boundary. So instead, you kind of just like passive aggressively throw remarks. Look at you, you're in the house again when I come home from work. Oh, well, if I could have some privacy around here. Remarks that actually cause more resentment and like tension undertones. Not setting that boundary keeps like putting a wedge and pushing you guys further and further and further apart from each other. So oftentimes we will not set a boundary because we're not yet clear on it ourselves. We are telling ourselves that we should want our sibling to come over, that they've done so much for us, so we should want that to be. And so you're sort of beating yourself up in your own mind about not wanting them to come over. You're judging yourself. And so because you're not being honest with yourself and therefore not with them, then you end up growing like this little baby resentment inside of you. You're resentful at them for coming over. Then you're mad at yourself for not being able to share that with them. And it causes just a ton of frustration for both you and then possibly your sibling. But a lot of times frustration comes from telling yourself that you're wrong for wanting or not wanting that thing. So then you don't end up setting the boundary that you deep down inside that you probably should or want to set. What is amazing is when you do clearly state your boundary, when you're saying it from a place of love and not like judgment or like, a shitty place, right? When you're saying it from love because you want more intimacy, more closeness, more connection with a person, most of the time when you do it like that, they will notice, they will feel that and be like, oh, okay, cool. It shouldn't matter how they react. Like that shouldn't be the reason why you do or don't do it. Now, if that other person also has issues with creating boundaries for themselves, maybe you grew up in the same family, this may be new to them. So they might take offense to it. But know that it's not because you created the boundary that they're taking offense. They're taking offense because they've never had boundaries set. Nobody's ever really done that for them. You ever been around somebody that has very clear boundaries and you know that they have boundaries, yet they've never stated them to you? But you can just feel, you sit up a little straighter around them. And like when you look at them in the eye, you respect them. They have an aura about them, right? You just kind of know there are certain things that you just wouldn't do around them that you might do around your family members or other people that you are in relationship with that don't have very clear boundaries, right? So that's kind of what I'm suggesting for you here. Not that you seem uppity or better than, but there's a way of holding yourself and like loving yourself that creates this boundary really without ever having to state it, because you're not stating it because you need somebody to do something else. This is just my standards for living, and I don't accept anything less, right? I want love in my life, and I'm doing it so that I can love. A boundary enables you to love bigger and more intensely, more intimately than you ever have. It creates the space for that. All right. So now with your children, I know that this is like the big question. So just to recap before I go there, adults can act however they want to act. Every other adult in your life or not in your life there is free will. I don't care about law, no law. People are going to act and they can act however they please. Okay? And just remember, as a rule book, keep it in your back pocket, that nobody else needs to change their behavior in order for you to feel how you want to feel. Okay? I know. I feel you through here. It's your thoughts that are causing your emotions about anything outside of you. Needing somebody else to change in order for you to feel A, B, or C will not get you there. I promise you. Like things are going to happen. Shit happens, right? Things are not always going to work out the way you want to. And when you are in emotional adulthood, you can choose how you want to think and feel about it. That's it. Okay. So a boundary is not a means of controlling somebody else and their behavior or getting them to do a list of tasks. If we're talking about a partner, like they need to take the trash out, they need to tell me they love me, buy me a birthday gift, or not get angry with me. That is their right to do whatever it is that they want to do, not buy the birthday gift, get angry with you. That's their behavior. What is a violation is anything that you have deemed unsafe for you and your space, okay? And when you have deemed specific things unsafe for you, things that you will not tolerate in your life, for your own health, right? Mental, physical, emotional, then you have protocol actions to take to remove yourself from the situation or support yourself in the situation. Okay, as far as children go, it's funny because I had this podcast, like I have all of August planned, like for the calendar. So I've had this scheduled since June. And I was just reading something on Reddit yesterday. It mentioned a Karen Woodall post, right? And we all love Karen Woodall. right? I don't know if it was titled boundaries, but like, yeah, I think it was like when moms are having boundary issues with their alienated kids. I was like, oh my gosh, how funny. Somebody had mentioned this article and I was like, look, that's what I'm doing. And so I went to go look at it. I mean, I probably would have anyway, but I was super curious for this episode. And so I went to go read it. And it has some really good information in there. And so I definitely recommend it. I'll drop the link in the show notes. So I was super interested in reading this article of hers, hoping to see if I would find any different information, like anything different than what my thoughts were. I'm always looking for like different points of view, especially from people that I respect. And so I was hoping to find something a little bit more directional. But she also left it pretty vague regarding like, if they do A, you can do B. And that is because I think anyway, for the same reasons that I kind of hinted at in the beginning, is that each one of our situations is so very different, even though at the core, the same dynamic is present. What's good for me may not be good for you and may not be good for the next person. You are the expert in your situation. You've heard me say this before if you've listened to the podcast, right? Ultimately, you have to trust that you do know what's best as far as, in this case, for setting boundaries. So she sort of solidified my belief there on that. But as I also mentioned before, it is important that you pay attention to your own signs of like activation of your own sense of fear, like why you're fearing setting boundaries. For most of us, and now I know that this was for moms, but also for fathers listening, I'll also link an article, which I didn't read fully, but there is a dad's version of the same thing by Karen Woodall that I'll link down in the show notes too. But still, the information in the mom one could go for the dad. It's interchangeable. So back to what I was saying is that you addressing why you're fearful, right? You addressing your own unprocessed trauma, maybe some abandonment, going on there, maybe feeling like if you say no, then this is going to be the end. It's going to be used against you. They're going to misconstrue. The story will be distorted and whatever. You have to know that this is possible. For sure, more than possible. I think you expect it. If and when you're going to set boundaries, if you're in the position where that is something that you need to do, and I'm going to give you an example of something in just a minute, then it's at your own discretion. You just have to know. It's like adults are allowed to do whatever the fuck they want to do, right? But when we're talking about kids, I don't believe that. I think most of you would agree with me. However, in our specific situation of alienation, we don't have the quote unquote control like we once did. So it's about weighing your options each time. There is no right or wrong answer. This is the thing now. It's what you're willing to follow through with. You're picking your battles. Is this one important to you at this moment in time? And if it is, then you pick a consequence or a response knowing that you will 100% follow through. This is not supposed to be a threat in any way. This will not come off well. But there is a way to show up clearly stating this boundary to your child so that you walk away and you feel good about it. And if it's misconstrued, then you know it's going to be on them. And that is this. So again, let me reiterate that it's not the time to set a boundary when you're acting from a place of fear or wanting to get a specific response from them or any response from them. If you're trying to manipulate, and you'll have to ask yourself this question, because there are times I'm not on my high horse when I'm saying this. I do this too, and I don't even realize it. We are human. Like, your subconscious is really honestly driving the bus 90% of the time. So you have to become aware of who's talking when in your brain, right? Up in the committee up there. So it takes mind management, paying attention to what's going on. Okay. And you're responsible for that. So when you are thinking, well, maybe if I just say this, you feel some desperation or a little urge, then maybe they'll comply. Maybe they'll want to hang out with me. Don't do it. Okay. That's not the time. The time is when you feel calm, gentle, and when you feel loving and confident. Also, you know that you are going to follow through on this. Let's say that you still share custody and your kiddo calls you and they're at their other parent's house, the alienating parent's house, but it's midnight or 11:30 on a Tuesday evening, school night. and they're like, I need to come over right now and blah, 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 blah. And for whatever reason, maybe a slew of reasons, you're like, I would love for them to come over. I really don't want to turn down the opportunity to connect with them. But at the same time, you know it's not the right thing for them to do at this moment because it might cause more problems and for a bunch of different reasons. So not that you're acting out of fear, you're acting with your higher thinking, knowing that you can plan this out and it can be a better experience planned out. So when they call and they're frantic and they're needing and expecting you to say yes, if in that moment you do want to set the boundary, it's this. It's simple. It's, honey, I'm so sorry you're stressed. Let's stay on the phone for a little while. And how about we plan for you to come over tomorrow after school? I feel like there are other circumstances that might make this an inopportune time. Although I want to see you, I love you. I want the opportunity to hear what's going on with you. I want nothing more than to spend all of the time together, whatever, however you word it. But like that you're offering them a solution. That's what they can handle at this age. So it's a loving no. And here's what we can do. So that's a very general way to handle that. And like I said, if I was coaching you or talking with you one-on-one, if you've got a specific situation, then you're welcome to email me. Or of course, you can join the Healing and Reinvention program, and I can help you out with like more specific set of circumstances for you to help you to boundary set with your child. So it's just a case by case basis, but there are definite ways, avenues that you can take for every situation, every sticky situation that you believe that you're in right now. There is a way to set a boundary. If it's a boundary issue, in a way that helps you to walk away from it, holding your head high, knowing and feeling that you did the right thing, never having to second guess yourself. Because I think going through what we've gone through, we have been persecuted so much that it becomes part of us. And then as humans anyway, we have that chatter that goes on up in our brain. And so we're hard on ourselves. It's difficult to separate when we're, what's the chatter and what's the truth? What is real? What you want to believe? So it makes sense sometimes when you're like, I just don't know. I'm second guessing myself. I don't know. I had somebody yesterday saying that, not just yesterday, this all the time. At least 4 days out of 5, I talk with somebody that says that they spent 2 hours on a single text to their ex, concocting it and making sure it was perfect and editing it and then going back and whatever. This is a very regular thing for us. We are so concerned about how it's going to be received because we're so concerned about the quote unquote boundaries that they set, their parameters, that we forget about our own. And then we get upset with them, even though they may have violated a boundary or something, or definitely a manual. We get upset with them, but forget that we never set our own boundaries. So yeah, the Healing and Reinvention program can help you out with that. Or else, you can always come coach with me if you want like results, stats. Within a couple of weeks, you will be finding a lot of release. Within 3 months, you will have like really started to get the hang of it. And by 6 months, you will see the world and interact with the world in an entirely different way than you once did 6 months beforehand. So if you want one-on-one coaching, that's really primarily what I do. And then I also have, of course, the Healing and Reinvention program, where it's the low-cost program that helps other parents like us to really work on your specific situations. And each month, we go through a topic where you rewire your brain and your thought patterns. You begin to think in a way that works for you as opposed to working against you. You really begin to separate truth from old ingrained beliefs that are inside you, question them and move from them and into a more productive way of thinking and living. So a boundary is where you end and where another person begins. It would be like if I was to draw a circle, like in the sand, and then this is me, and then the other person is outside of that, or whatever is outside of that. If you're watching, you'll get this. But if you're listening, just picture that I am drawing a circle. You are in control of here. This is what you are responsible for. Anything outside of your little circle, your little bubble, is somebody else's responsibility. It's clearly stated. When you don't state it, when you don't voice clearly what your boundary is, then you are withholding from the person. And so you're not acting out of love, you're actually pulling up a wall. And that I think is important to state too. There is definitely a difference between withdrawing from something, somebody, a relationship, or you can draw your circle, right? I mean, don't actually do that because that would be juvenile. But taking care of you and expressing that to somebody clearly is really, truly an act of love. So on the same note as that, when somebody sets a boundary with you, instead of thinking about it, like, I mean, you can think about it however you want, but I want to offer you a thought. Like, has anybody ever set a boundary with you and you have been like, oh, and you felt either one of two things? You immediately will get defensive and feel on guard and like, oh, I was just, so you feel like you need to come to your own defense, or you make a huge deal about it. Like you're like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And you go overly to try to like win back their affection and their approval by trying to like work really hard to scramble back into their bubble. Notice this. This is actually your attachment things coming up. I don't want to say issues, but it is really. And so it's something to look at. I want to offer you the idea that if somebody is caring enough to take the time to voice their preferences to you, for you, with you, they're actually investing in you, investing in the relationship. Because a person who didn't bother to tell you, then, and they just like avoided you, or just like, I hate the word, the term ghosted. I think it's just overly said, but like if they just in turn just ghosted you and just avoided you from then on because they didn't want to deal with having to come and say anything to you, that would require no courage on their part. They just want to get out of the situation. They didn't like how you behaved, so they just wanted to get away from you and not spend time with you again. Rather, if a person actually expresses clearly what it is that they do want, right, how they will behave and what is acceptable to them, I think you should think about taking it as a compliment, because it does take a lot of courage to state a boundary clearly. It really does. It takes some vulnerability to be able to stop somebody and say, hey, you know what? This doesn't work for me. Because some people will act like, let's say, like you might have, and feel like they're either being, there's disapproval or they're being shunned or whatever. So anyway, when somebody expresses this with you and states a boundary with you, instead of getting offended, maybe you can consider the option of like, oh yeah, well, that actually took a lot of guts for them. That took self-respect and love for the both of us in order to do that. And that's sort of their invite to me to experience more intimacy in our relationship, even with just a platonic friendship. So that's just a way to think about it. And two, as I just touched on, it does take courage to set a boundary, right? It takes you like knowing that there's a moment of like, well, if they could not respond well. They could not like what I have to say. And they could in turn walk away from our relationship, or they could not want to spend more time with me. It could happen. But the alternative is not saying what your boundaries are and not sharing with them what you truly want. And there is no closeness. That's another barrier between you, because then you're not able to be upfront and honest with them. And that's on you, because you're not willing to chance the possible rejection. But anyway, if you're not being honest and you're staying in this relationship because you're scared that they're going to leave and you're not able to be yourself, well, you may as well not be in the relationship anyway, because you're not showing up as yourself. You're distancing yourself from the person. So a boundary promotes closeness. Boundaries, you set them for you. It's where you end and another person begins. Always set from a place of love, even if you don't love the other person, like we're talking about the alienating parent. You can do it in love for yourself, for your child, and just in general. So it's never out of anger, exasperation, sense of entitlement, or like, I must. That right there, most of the time, you've already missed the opportunity to set a boundary for yourself. So that's just part one of boundaries. Okay. I made that actually really long. I'm going to have to do a lot of editing because I was chatty Cathy. Yeah. Anyway, so that's it. That's all I have for you guys today. You have a lovely week. Thanks so much for listening today, guys. I'm honored that you chose to share your time with me. If you like what you've been hearing and you want more, come join me in the new monthly membership, where we take the concepts that you hear about here and, using a logical framework, you learn to apply them to your specific situations, upgrading your thoughts and your life, even while experiencing the grief of alienation. For more information, go to beyondthehighroad.com. See you soon.